We're talking all things James Bond and reviewing No Time to Die tonight on Real to Real Talk.
Film is a medium that transports. All I have to do is pop myself in front of the TV to watch a movie, and I can just enjoy it, whatever place the film takes me to.
Movies have always been an escape. It gives you a whole new world to be in.
I have a rekindled love affair with movies.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Real to Real Talk. I am Sergio Barrera, and it is time once again to talk all things movies. Joining me, as always, are the other Real to Real Talkers, Susan Chisholm and Paul Britton. And guys, tonight, it's all about 007.
James fucking Bond!
Yeah.
Indeed.
It's 10.
Yeah.
It is the Bond film franchise that we're going to be talking about tonight as we get ready to discuss what is probably one of the most iconic series of films, 26 in all, 27 if you count the very first Casino Royale, which was a comedy. But it is not part of the main, list of films. I will say that one of the things I discovered as I prepared for this particular episode was discovering that On Her Majesty's Secret Service wasn't the first Bond film. I've grown up my entire life thinking that was the first one before Sean Connery, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That is true. You were wrong. I'm helpful.
I mean,
I'm incredible.
I don't know what to do. I mean, like, Lazenby is, was like in the middle of Sean Connery's role,
Right.
wasn't he? Yeah.
Well, he was at the tail end because it was Lazenby. I learned this literally today.
Okay.
Was between Sean Connery and Roger Moore.
Right.
But for
and
whatever
Sean
reason,
Connery
I
came
always
back
thought
and did, what was that one
he
called?
did an extra one. Where he played an aged Bond.
In the 80s. Oh, God.
yeah.
Why can't I think of it? Anyway, it was not good, but that's all right.
It was not good. No, not at all. In fact, is it even considered canon to the entire series?
What is canon when you're talking about Bond? I mean, canon is pretty restrictive to whatever, whichever person is playing Bond at the time. They don't usually do a lot of like, oh, this happened with this other guy, and now he's going to have a memory of that, and it's going to haunt him. It's like, most of the other Bonds are barely haunted by stuff that happened to them in the prior movie. So
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned that because my coworker and I mentioned what we were talking our topic today, and we had a little discussion about it. He's like, "What if?" He mentioned to me that there's this like theory that it's not a person. James Bond is not a person, but a title. And so there are multiple James Bonds in the same universe. And I was
God, I hate fan theories so much.
I mean, it's one of those things where I was like, maybe, but also probably not.
And also I hate
lean towards probably not.
I said I would mention it, and I did. I mentioned
okay.
it. So
never say never again. Sorry about that.
There you go.
God, that was going to kill me. Yeah, I hate fan theories. That's
and
it.
So the overall thing I think we should start with, obviously, this film franchise has become one of the most resilient in terms of surviving for this long over this many movies, because in large part the success early on of the Ian Fleming books. I mean, Ian Fleming as an author brought the James Bond character to us. I've read a few of the books, and as my movie watching has expanded over the years, I know that I was always, regardless of who played Bond, I was always going to look forward to, what is the next Bond film going to be. And so I think tonight what we should do is we should kind of talk a little bit about the franchise as a whole, maybe share what some of our favorites are, or, our thoughts on some of the films. We also talking about the unique villains found within the James Bond franchises. And also, of course, we've got to talk about James Bond himself, those who played the role or have played the role over the years. But I must first ask, and we'll start with Susan and then Paul and myself, what was your first James Bond film? Where did the journey begin for you?
For me, GoldenEye.
Okay.
That was my first one that I watched in its entirety, that I watched from beginning to end without stopping in the middle. So yeah, GoldenEye.
And what was it about that got you? Because obviously this is comparative to the movie watching that you've shared with us. This really is a franchise that you've taken to. So what was it that really brought you into it?
And see, I don't want to say that GoldenEye is what drew me into James Bond. I
Okay.
think that it was multiple viewings of multiple different movies that was kind of like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer's funny. I like the entire package of what James Bond is, who he is, and what he does. And the different ways that the different actors took on the roles and made it their own. And there is never two that were never exactly the same. And I loved that it was always enjoyable across the board. I mean, yeah, there are movies that are less enjoyable, but if you go down to the heart of what it is, it does what it's supposed to do, I guess. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Paul, what about you? Where did it start for you?
Oh boy. Like, are we talking about ones that came out in theaters, and which one?
No, you're just your first exposure to the Bond, film world.
Sure. So it was a favorite of my grandparents and also of my dad. And my grandparents were one of the first people that I knew on the planet that had a VCR. It was like this big and this tall and weighed about 500 pounds, and you loaded it on the top. And they had a copy of Dr. No and Goldfinger. And so we came down to visit, and I'm not sure if they showed us Dr. No or Goldfinger first, but I was super young, but I do remember this. And I think we definitely watched Goldfinger because part of it was filmed at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. And so like they showed us the movie and they're like, now let's go see the hotel. And so then they took us down to the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami. And that was like, as a kid, that was like, oh my God, this is really cool. That's where, it was just really cool to see that. That's one of those two would have been the first one that I saw. And then subsequently, they used to have these things where, and I think I've mentioned it before, where you would go into like a little room, and if you didn't own a VCR, you could rent the movie and they would show you the movie. And sure. Like my dad would, Bond movies were high on the rotation for going in. But the first one I saw in theaters was what was it called? For Your Eyes Only. That's the first one I saw in a theater. So 1981.
Right. Well, for myself, you just named my first film, my first Bond film. For Your Eyes Only was the very first exposure I had to the James Bond character, and it started with a comic book of all things. Back in the early '80s, there were comic books that were released sometimes in association with films, and I had gotten like one copy or one installment of the For Your Eyes Only comic series, and immediately was like, I want to see this movie. And I remember having to convince my parents to let me go see it. And well, I didn't. I was 11, so they had to take me. Which of course meant I had to convince all of my other 5 siblings to want to go see it too, because they were never going to just take one of us. So
right.
That was the first movie that I remember seeing, and that began over the next couple of summers a tradition within my family where we were able to begin watching all of the Sean Connery, Roger Moore films. Like, they were brought to us by our parents, and it took 2 or 3 summers to get through all of the existing Bond movies at the time, but that kind of became a family tradition, and that's really where I started watching, which is hilarious because I went back recently and started watching a few of the Sean Connery and Roger Moore ones, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a little bit ashamed I like this. So
if you go back now and look at them, it's like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
This
the
is
most politically correct
painful.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yikes.
they don't always will.
I think, yeah, that's the only thing you can just be like, yikes.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about them is the pacing is really weird too. It's
Yeah.
like you're used to a certain pacing for like action movies and that sort of, and it's just, I mean, and that's just pacing for just about any movie at the time. It's, you know, they're very slow.
Yeah,
They're-
yeah, absolutely.
you know,
Mhm.
yeah.
You know, I think one of the things I do want us to sort of touch on is our thoughts on what would you guys say are the elements that make a good James Bond film? Like what is necessary? And then we'll start talking about like what are some of the standout films that we go back to and enjoy, or would say are some of the best, you know, of this entire series. So, Paula, why don't you start us off? What are some hallmarks of a good Bond film?
You need a great villain.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like if you don't have a great villain, you're dead in the water to begin with. Just absolutely has to be compelling. And you there has to be just where the hell am I at this point in time feeling to the movie. Like it just has to hopscotch all over the globe for
Yeah.
almost seemingly no reason. And preferably the more ridiculous the gadgets, the better. Like, and
Yep.
and I will say, you know, not to tip my hand at all, but that's one of my favorite thing about the Roger Moore era is that they definitely leaned super heavy into the stupid gadgets during the Roger Moore era, and so and I appreciated that.
Yeah, and it's
That's all.
something that's decidedly missing from the most recent
Mm-hmm.
you know, series. Susan, what about you? What else would you add as being a necessary trope for a Bond film?
Well, I mean, he touched on the villains. Like you've got to have a good and convincing. Well, maybe not even convincing. You've got to have a good villain that's really makes the story. And then, of course, like you know, without being, it would not be a Bond film without like the love interest, the woman, the
Sure.
womanizing, if you will, like you know, and it wouldn't be a Bond film without 1,001 near misses. Of
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure he's dead. Oh, he's not dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Or, you know, I'm pretty sure he didn't make it out of that one, or I'm pretty sure he's arrested or caught now. And then it's like, well, suddenly he escapes. That's cool. I think, you know, obviously the other characters that are repeating, like MQ, Moneypenny, they've got to be there, and they've always got to have their definite ways of being.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, yeah, that's my answer.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to be said for what we find in, you know, commonalities across all these Bond films. You've got to have car chases. You've got to have, you know, some sort of outrageous stunt. I think of, you know, some of the things that I've seen in these films, and there's almost this idea of like trying to outdo, you know, previous films and such. One of the interesting points that I want to touch on when we get to our review of No Time to Die was just how much this film did its best to genuinely give an homage to so many of the traditional Bond tropes. And we'll talk about that when it's time. Rather than sort of filter through 25, 26 films and, you know, do lists of 5 or whatever, let's at least start with, is there a film you would say is the one that you would say is the best? And then is there one you could get rid of from the franchise? And then we'll let that sort of dig into other films we might mention along the way. So, you know, for each of us, what is a film that you say, okay, for me, this is the best one. And then for me, this is one I could do without, and let's see where it leads us.
Okay, so I think No Time to Die is it's leaning heavily into my favorite category. I will say one that I can watch over and over again and not like be annoyed with is probably The World Is Not Enough. I don't know why that particular one is like it's one of those like, yeah, I can watch this over and over again. Not be, I mean, I know what's gonna happen, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'd say the one that can be removed from the franchise entirely is the original Casino Royale, because what the fuck? What was even going on there? I'm just curious. Like, it's not meant to, that wasn't meant to be. That was not meant to be. Okay, that's wrong. It's wrong.
And it's not really a James Bond movie, so let's be like, it's a spoof. It's a spoof.
It's definitely a spoof. Yeah.
Yeah, so. I don't. But it's considered in the list of in the franchise. It's considered in the list. I'm not a big fan. So
yeah. Paul, what about you?
Well, from modern era, Skyfall is just like amazing. Like, Skyfall is just such an amazing movie.
Yes.
But like, my old timey favorite is The Spy Who Loved Me. Is my old timey favorite. And like, basically Timothy Dalton. Just, you can just take that chunk of time and chuck it out the window, and we can never have to hear from it again. And
can I change my answer? We were talking about Bond in preparation for this, and I was like completely omitting Timothy Dalton without, like, it didn't even stick in my head, because I was like, that's not Bond.
No, it's and it's not entirely his fault. I mean, what they gave him was not good to begin with. Like, those are just genuinely not entertaining or interesting movies to begin with, and then add on to it that it's trying to be Bond, and it's just like, ugh, they're just blah.
Absolutely,
and part of that is the era too. Movies, they were making old action movies when action movies were redefining themselves, and Bond just hadn't caught up. The people making Bond just weren't there yet. So
for myself, of course, you guys knew this was coming. The Timothy Dalton era for me was actually, I do like those films. And one of the reasons is because, again, they were gritty, coming off of all of the spoofiness of the Roger Moore era. I got tired of the Bond franchise, even though, the Roger Moore films are very entertaining. The Sean Connery ones, again, difficult to watch now. But I still find that the spoofiness of the Roger Moore era was like, okay, it got a little more forget Moonraker. It's like, I mean, geez Louise. That's the one I would check out, is Moonraker. While Skyfall, I agree, Paul, with you, sort of modern era is my absolute favorite. And I have to echo Susan in that, man, after No Time to Die, I'm seriously like, I'm figuring out where it's really going to all fall when it's said and done. But I was a big fan of the Timothy Dalton movies. And while I'm not going to say that License to Kill was going to be my favorite, but it was one that I really enjoyed. There was a grittiness to it. And I read an article just this morning that talked about how part of the speculation was that part of what didn't hit with those two movies was that people weren't ready for a gritty James Bond. There had been so much spoofiness that had gone on for so long, because Roger Moore, of course, has such a long tenure in the role that, it just, what Daniel Craig managed to pull off in redefining this character, Timothy Dalton, has been interviewed and said, this is kind of what I was trying to do. And what I was told to try to do, to make it more stoic, to make it more gritty. And people just weren't ready for that. Not defending the overall films themselves against, because in the entirety of the franchise, it's not going to those won't even break the top 10. But there was something about the way in which he portrayed the role that really appealed to me, because I was tired of the spoofiness. And then we got back to, here comes Pierce Brosnan, and we suddenly start getting all these weird character names and so forth. And I'm like, we're right back to where we were with Roger Moore. So for me, Skyfall is probably top of my list right now. If I had to pick from that era, one that I would go back to, if you take away the Daniel Craig era for just a moment, I really love License to Kill, and that's going to be one that I would return to over a lot of the Roger Moore and Sean Connery ones. And Pierce Brosnan, oh God, we're going to talk Bonds in a minute, but those films were tough for me. I'm like, this is so corny. But what are some other standouts, like films that you're like, if I had to take 3 or 4 James Bond movies with me to an island, Paul, where would you begin, and what films have to be in your satchel?
Well, okay. So outside of the ones that I've already mentioned, I would also want to bring The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
Just there's something about owning an island that has some kind of underground wackiness going on that I enjoy in movies, I guess. I don't know,
layer.
but
A layer.
yeah, a layer. Yes. Under a hidden island layer. You know, I do love Goldfinger. That's a little cliche and easy, but it's also true. And Casino Royale is, you know, just such a great way to kick off, to make that your first one. It's just like, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Such a great story. Susan, what about you? Which Bond movies have to go with you on an island?
Okay. So
with laser sharks.
I mean, we've listed all the favorites. Like Skyfall is one of my favorites too. That's really hard. It's not fair.
You could visit Paul's island and borrow some of his. So,
and I promise I'll disable all the traps.
Mostly. And then next time we see Paul, he's got an eye patch or something. We're like,
yep.
What happened here? I've said this before on this show, and complete polar opposite to what Sergio says. I feel like Pierce Brosnan is my Bond, and so I would take his entire group of movies.
Okay.
And it's because, and maybe it's just because it was like the first Bond that I was ever introduced to, and GoldenEye's, I mean, easily the best of his set of movies, and I got to start from the beginning and watch the best one first.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my answer, I guess.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, I would have to again. I've mentioned that I would need the Timothy Dalton ones on my island. For me, if I had to pick one from the Sean Connery era that had to come with me, which again, who knows, a Goldfinger for sure. Roger Moore, For Your Eyes Only, would have to be on my list. A View to a Kill, I enjoyed. And then, the entire, I can actually do without Pierce Brosnan's era, other than the fact that Judi Dench is in them as M, and she carried into, the last series, the latest series. And so,
John Cleese as Q was an inspired choice.
I agree. But yeah, in order not to take all 5 of the Daniel Craigs, just because that would be too easy. If I had to make a hard choice, and if I don't include No Time to Die, Casino Royale has to come with me. I love that film, and Skyfall's wonderful. But if I had to decide, okay, which one do I go? Like, if I only had to choose one, I love Casino Royale for so many reasons. So, yeah. So let's talk villains a bit. If there's anything that this series has given us in terms of, memorable things, there have been some memorable villains. From Jaws to Le Chiffre and so many in between. Are there villains that stand out to you that you just say, hey, this is definitely a villain that fit the bill?
So I like the repeated villain in Blofeld. So he started back, like way back in the beginning, like with I can't remember which was the first movie. I remember him being in You Only Live Twice, but like I think that the way that he carried on, and it was like the one thing that Bond couldn't help or couldn't stop him overcome. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. To me, that's something that kind of stands out.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was so much cat usage. I read an article a long time ago that tried to justify that the actual villains in those early Bond films was the cat.
Yes. I mean,
meow.
Possibly.
Yeah. I love, so I will say the one thing that older Bond does better than newer Bond is the henchmen. The henchmen are better. Odd Job, Jaws, you mentioned.
Right.
The one thing that the Daniel Craig movies did the best is the top villains. I mean, all 5 of those films have they just went out and said, we're going to get the best actors available, on the planet, not just to play in Bond, but just the best actors to do anything. And we're going to bring them in and we're going to have them play Bond villains. And Christoph Waltz is like probably my favorite actor alive right now. And he's a Bond villain. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I'm in. I'm 100% in.
Yeah. And he's Blofeld.
And he's Blofeld. Right. Exactly. Christopher Lee was the villain in Man with the Golden Gun. I mean, that was my introduction to Christopher Lee. I didn't know him as a Dracula. I knew him as the bad guy from the Man with the Golden Gun. Like, oh my God. It's so awesome to just have, and that was one of the things that I liked about the Roger Moore movies, was that like Jaws carried over, and like they did have a little bit, there were a couple others that would carry from one film to the other, and that's always fun too, having the bad guys.
Am I insane, or wasn't there a moment in one of the films where Jaws actually started to sort of get friendly with Bond, or am I just dreaming that? The evolution of the character.
Yeah, no, I think it might have happened in The Spy Who Loved Me. Well, there was a scene where like it was one of those where like they just kill everybody, and so like he's not really friendly. It's just kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to pause killing you to kill this guy over here.
Gotcha.
But now I'm going to come back at
Yeah. Such a great
I'll save you
role.
for later.
Yeah, because we're going to talk about No Time to Die. Let's talk a little bit about the villains within the series of 5 movies that Craig is part of. The difference between the Daniel Craig series and the others is, of course, this continued storyline. Were there any villains out of Raul Silva, Lashif, even the sort of minor villains, Mr. White? Blofeld obviously to me is top of the list, but who did you like in this most recent rendition that were our villains, and why did they work so well in this series? And Susan, we'll start with you.
I liked Javier Bardem as Raul Silva. Because it was convincing, because it was very dang it. I'm sorry. I have a headache and I can't think of the right word that I'm looking for here, but it was just one of those things where it was like, wow, he could.
It was creepy.
He was, yeah. I mean, he was creepy. Yes, of course. But, and it was just the way, and I really credit that to Javier Bardem, because he made it his own. And it was just like, absolutely. But I think anytime I think of like Daniel Craig and villains, he's the one that pops into my head. He's memorable. Yeah, definitely.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean that would be mine too. I mean, if you've seen No Country for Old Men, it's like he takes the creepiness from No Country for Old Men and manages to ratchet up like 2 or 3 notches, which is like saying a lot, because he's like one of the creepiest people on the planet in No Country for Old Men. But Mads Mikkelsen as Lashif is just like, oh, come on. Like, it's Mads Mikkelsen, man. I mean, he's amazing. I don't know. And hey, look, it's no easy task to share bad guy billing with Christoph Waltz, but I think, I can't think of his name. I'm just Freddie Mercury. Why can't I?
Rami Malek.
Thank you. I think Rami Malek does an amazing job in this. Like, and I don't know. I thought he did really well. I don't know. It's good. It's good.
All right. Well, so we get to the Bonds. Sean Connery, Roger Moore, George Lazenby. You have Timothy Dalton, to the regret of some, Pierce Brosnan, and Daniel Craig. is it fair to rank them since they come across so many eras, or how do you guys feel?
If you want to
about the
rank them,
Bonds?
let's do it. Let's do it.
I mean, if we rank them, it's gonna be personal preference,
It's
because
totally
but
personal
and
preference.
we have to take into consideration all the differences across the different eras in terms of like what technology was available and stuff like that. So
Yeah, well, and for portrayal purposes, like who played a good Bond. I I would venture to say that there's not a lot of fault I can find in any of the Bonds per se, but did any stand out more than, do you have preferences, I guess? And
For
so,
sure.
Susan, since this is your wheelhouse, can you get us started and just walk us through your thoughts on the portrayals of the different actors as this character?
so am I ranking them, or I'm just going through one
Totally
at a
up
time?
to you how you want to
I
talk about
don't think I want to rank them.
it. Okay.
I can't. That's not fair. I can't do that. So despite the cringiness of watching it now and how society itself has changed, so I think Sean Connery was the most I don't know how to describe it. He's just the eyebrow raise, I guess. He's kind of like, okay, all right then. I guess I am kind of ranking him a little bit. Dang it. Can I go backwards? I want to go backwards. We've talked about this before, that Daniel Craig hadn't been my favorite Bond because of the grittiness as compared to, I guess, the campiness of Pierce Brosnan, and that was something that I had liked, and because Pierce Brosnan was my first Bond. He's gotten I've warmed up to him a little bit, so I'd say he's probably my favorite Bond now. I think Pierce Brosnan, despite all the corniness, he did what he did what he was supposed to do. I mean, you can't fault the guy for writing. He delivered it well. I have not, so the older films, I watched them a long time ago. I didn't particularly like Roger Moore, but that's just me in the way that I watched him. Yeah. I guess. Timothy Dalton was all right, I guess, but I didn't have any strong feelings either way. I didn't know, but you like him, and Paul was like, I hate him. I didn't have any strong feelings either way.
Gotcha.
And I'm ashamed to admit that I didn't see the Lazenby ones. I missed somewhere along the way.
It's easy to miss.
It's one movie.
Yeah.
I missed it somewhere along the way. So
it's one movie. He has a wife. It's
really strange. It's
very strange. It's very strange.
I didn't miss anything, I guess.
No. Not saying that. Just saying it is really, the whole vibe of it is very different.
Yeah.
I think did I go through all of them? I think I did, right?
I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
So, Paul, if I may, do you mind if we finish with you on this one?
Sure.
Okay. So, because for me, like I said, I think my whole deal with the Bond films, from a portrayal standpoint, I think each brought something unique. Connery, of course, plays closest to the books in terms of the portrayal of the role. Where Roger Moore, I think for me was successful is that he had that sort of suave, same as Pierce Brosnan. They both had that sort of suave, debonair approach. Brosnan looked amazing in a tux. He had the mannerisms down. So many people wanted him for so long. And I think part of my issue with Brosnan was that by the time those movies rolled around, by the time he finally got the mantle, it was like, okay, it just seemed like the same thing over and over and over, despite the difference in the story. Plus, I can't recall any memorable villains from that era of Bond films. And so, again, trying not to rank them, the reason I like Dalton was the grittiness. George Lazenby, for what it was. But I really, and maybe it's because it's most recent, I really just can't take away anything from what Daniel Craig brought to the role. Mainly because I remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the press junket moment when he was introduced. He was brought in by a military boat. It was a very like purposefully set up moment where these British soldiers brought him across this sort of river to the press conference to introduce him as the new Bond. And I remember sitting there thinking, that's who we're going to get? Like, that's who they chosen? And I was just ready to be so disappointed. But then Casino Royale came out, about a year later, and I was like, oh, that's who they chose. And so thus began my love for this most recent series. So, I can't rank them because they're all great for different reasons. They all have their pitfalls. But they've kept the franchise alive. So I'm happy for that. So, Paul?
I'm not going to rank them as much as 1 through 6, but I will say for me, there are 2 tiers.
Okay.
There's a top tier where if you put in any Sean Connery, Roger Moore, or Daniel Craig Bond movie and say, hey, we're going to watch this, don't go anywhere, I'll be like, yeah, all right, I'll hang out for a couple hours or 3, depending on which one you're putting in. And then there's the other tier, which is if you put in one of those movies from any Pierce Brosnan movie, any the one Lazenby movie and Dalton, like if you said, hey, no, wait, don't go anywhere, we're putting this in, I'll be like, nah, I'm not good. I'm gonna go. Like there's absolutely nothing that you could do to get me to sit down and watch one of those other than now I kind of feel bad that I don't like Timothy Dalton as much as I don't like him, because I literally haven't watched any of his movies since they came out because they were just utterly forgettable.
Gotcha.
But maybe I need to give him a second chance, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's like Sean Connery and Roger Moore and Daniel Craig did it for a long time.
Right.
I think for a reason. Like I think there's a reason why Timothy Dalton only did 2. And I think there's a reason why Pierce Brosnan only did 3. And I think there's a reason, well, and Lazenby just didn't want to do anymore. Like he signed up for 1 and was like, yeah, I'm out, guys. Thanks. And so, I there's a reason for that. So
sure. No, that makes sense.
Did 4?
Pierce Brosnan did 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how much. I mean, really, I'm shocked about that. Like, I have no idea.
I almost kind of want to revisit those.
Probably haven't seen one of them, I guess.
Not that much.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's an amazing franchise. There's so much that's great. There's so much that's not so great, but I can tell you that when a new Bond film comes out, I'm there. We, of course, now reach the point where we're ready to talk about the latest installment in the Daniel Craig era of the James Bond franchise, and that is the film No Time to Die. This movie was scheduled to come out. In fact, Susan, I almost want you to try to recreate the journey that this film took to get to us this past weekend. Any thoughts you might have on what it took to get this film?
Oh God, I cannot recreate that rant that I had. There's no way. I was so mad because it was like, first they're going to talk about the James Bond film that's going to be released on this day, and they're like, no, it's not going to be released on this day. It's going to be released on this day, and then they're like, okay, fine, we're going to release it on this day, but then they go to that day and it's not released yet. And then they're like, okay, next year. And then it's like, all of a sudden it's October of 21. And now we can't watch it until October. I can't even. It was something along those lines. I was angry.
Yeah, it took a while to get to us.
Angry.
Yeah. I mean, this was 6 years between the 4th and 5th installment. It's crazy.
It's the longest gap between Bond movies.
Mm-hmm. So, and it was delayed, what, 3 times?
Yeah. Something like
3
that.
3 times or 4 times. Yeah. And that, I mean, every time they delayed it, I was like, God damn it.
I mean, it's, and the thing that's so ironic is we finally get it, and it's a continuation of a story that we were basically asked to wait for this next chapter for, again, 6 years, which I thought was ironic because you have this scene that is obviously a pretty directly after what happened in Spectre, and then it goes 5 years later. I'm like, well, okay, now I'm gonna feel a little bit better about the timing.
Works perfect.
Works just fine. So as this film begins, we get that classic opening, action sequence And this is where I say so many Bond tropes happen in just that first 15 minutes, before we get the song, because it was quite long, that opening sequence. And it was such a great homage to the life of this franchise. I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but I was sucked in immediately.
The only thing he didn't do is go skiing. That was the only thing missing.
Yes. And I think that was actually avoided in all 5 that we've seen recently with Daniel Craig. But yeah, the car, he managed, wasn't it a motorcycle and a car before the sequence was over? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the only thing he didn't do was fly a plane. I mean, it was just, it was so wonderfully put together to start. And it launched this film forward in a way that I felt like shot out of a cannon.
Mm-hmm.
But I was okay with that.
Yeah, and that opening sequence was just
bananas.
Yeah, perfect.
It was stellar, yeah.
Yeah, Susan and then Paul, just kind of talk about those first few minutes and your thoughts of how did it set the stage for what then followed?
I think it did. It was one of those things where, we hit the ground running. We hit the ground running from the moment that it started. And it never, and we've talked about this, it never let up the entire time. So I think that it started the pace and it kept it. It was 100%.
Yeah, and man, I mean, it just, you had like 2 seconds to enjoy the fact that Bond was there with retired with someone that he loved, and then it was just like, maybe not. We're just gonna, we're just gonna push this plot forward a little bit here by having things explode, and it's just like, I mean, he jumps from a friggin' bridge. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, in the previews, and I saw that, I was thinking to myself, like, oh yeah, that's going to be somewhere along in the middle of the movie. It's in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
So much of that trailer
was just the first
bits and pieces from the first 10 minutes.
First 10 minutes,
great.
exactly.
So great. And so as this film got started, you again, to Paul's point, it's a Bond who has seemingly come to terms with the Vesper issue, is ready to make that leap, and there's that part of you that's like, oh, okay, well, this is nice, and then shit explodes, and you're like, what? And so it starts fast, it moves fast. I never felt like the pacing of this film was uncomfortable. I think it was quiet when it needed to be. It was action packed right from the outset, and in order to avoid spoilers, it's going to be tough, but I want us to try to, because I don't want that I don't want to be the show that does it. But can we please begin, or at least before we dive further into how we felt this film worked or didn't work, can we just give a shout out to Billie Eilish for a fucking amazing theme song?
Yes.
God almighty. I was like, Sam Smith was my favorite one until I heard this. And I think all of the songs that opened the Daniel Craig era, phenomenal. But Billie Eilish, oh my goodness, what a song.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And the interesting thing about the opening sequence was there were you mentioned homages in the first 10 minutes to this franchise. There were homages to like Casino Royale in the the classic silhouette sequence. There were homages to the other Daniel Craig movies, and I thought that was really interesting and fun, and it was appropriate. It was just like, we're tying this all together and we're gonna put a bow on it, and too bad.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk what works in this film from a production standpoint, whether it be cinematography, special effects. What were the things that stood out to you guys about this film from a production standpoint? Because for me, I think it begins and ends with the cinematography, the landscapes that they gave us. So from that opening sequence with the frozen lake to so many others, what worked for you guys, production wise?
I think that production wise they made use of colors really, really well. So like you said, the frozen lake was blue. Everything about it was blue. But when they returned back to that same house later on, when he goes to get her,
Mhm.
it's orange, and it's a happy moment because orange is a happy color. So it's like the way that they used that, and everything in Cuba was grayish, like it was very like monotone. I think that they did that on purpose. And there's
Okay.
no way that they didn't do that on purpose. That's what worked for me.
All right.
I think the best part of the production was Anna de Armas's dress and her kicking ass while wearing that dress.
Golly, yes, absolutely.
Double-sided tape is all I gotta say.
Oh my
What a
God.
sequence! What a sequence!
And she was amazing. I mean, like her
Yeah.
character was just super fun. Like
It was
I would
perfect.
watch her and Daniel Craig do like a spin-off, like, Bond and Paloma, and just them go do a wacky adventure and just fun and drunk
It becomes
together.
a sitcom.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
I'm there. I am in. No, but like, look, this production was just all about paying, taking what's happened in the prior 4 films and literally just tying it all together and
Yeah.
just and keeping the tone that had been set in those first 4 films and keeping it rolling until until there's a final an ending, and they succeeded in that. That's really the big thing about this one is it's the last chapter and it has to stand alone and close off a story. And yeah, I mean, that's the amazing thing that really succeeds, I think.
Yeah.
Is the film too long?
Yes.
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, listen. Okay.
No one's right or wrong. I'm very curious because this is a question that I have because of my thoughts on it. So please, by all means, guys, share your thoughts.
I have the world's smallest bladder. I went to the bathroom once, and it was like towards the beginning where there was not a whole lot going on, and I was like, please tell me if I miss anything. And I ran.
He had just met Paloma.
He just met Paloma. I
Okay.
ran to the bathroom, did my business, and ran back as fast as I could because I didn't want to miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't.
And I didn't. And for me to say I didn't go to the bathroom the entire rest of the time because the movie had me that entertained. And it didn't feel like 2 hours and 50 minutes. That's saying something.
No, I just feel like there was a lot of emoting that we don't necessarily need to just constantly be emoting.
Yeah.
I get that they're trying to emote. I think that you can dial down your emoting a couple levels and still successfully tell a good story.
Yeah.
I mean,
I felt.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that yeah, there are things that could have been done without or different, but
Sure.
still worked out.
Well,
fine.
and again, this is where I say we no right or wrong, just opinion, because I really thought that was a factor of this film that for me, I'm not going to deny Rami Malek is fantastic and he does a great, wonderful job in this role, but he slowed the movie down.
Yeah, he did.
There were points in his character development, in his exchanges, and I get this is a guy who speaks with his face as much as with his voice, right?
Mhm.
And the character was built so that his face it was a part of him, right?
Mhm.
But it was just a point where I thought every time he comes on screen, the bottom falls out of the pacing, and it slows this film down so dramatically for me. And that was really one of the only struggles I had with this film. Was we could have tightened those scenes up. 230 versus 250 is a big deal. In terms of time. And so I felt the movie ran too long because we spent too much time on a character that we get it. You want to kill everybody. Like,
Yeah.
And so that was really my only issue from a production standpoint, is just the editing slowed way down on the same character over and over and over. So
yeah, that's fair. Even though I did love Malek in this, you're right. he did quite a bit of emoting himself.
Yeah.
I
With
mean,
his eyes.
I could definitely see that, but it's
can
to
swim into
me,
that.
it still was. Ew. It still felt fine to me.
Oh sure, yeah. No, I'm gonna watch it again. Like I
Sure.
really want to see it again.
Sure.
So from a portrayal standpoint, were there any other characters? Rami Malek, we've talked about, obviously, Daniel Craig. Ana de Armas, awesome. I felt like Ray Fiennes just sort of phoned it in as M this time around.
He did a lot of emoting himself.
Yeah.
He was a very broody M.
Yeah,
He was
which was different from his prior portrayals.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, but and again, when you're trying to accomplish as much as was needed to be accomplished, I think that there was too much introduced. I love the notion of the 007 tag having been handed to someone, but either commit to the character in a bigger way or don't do it. Because I felt like the moment she handed the mantle back, I'm like, oh, this could have been such a great character.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know the actress or actor that played her. I can't think of her in previous work, but I found myself going, ooh, okay, I like this dynamic of, who's the 007. But then I felt let down because I was like, oh, now they're going to minimize her role the rest of the way. So again, little picks like that is what I've got to sort of take apart this film on. Otherwise, I don't have a lot to say negative about the film. I just really wanted more of some of these characters they introduced us to.
Yeah,
So.
Lashana Lynch. She was in Captain Marvel. She was she was Brie Larson's friend. In Captain Marvel. So.
Got it. She's wonderful in this role. I just wish they'd given us more. So
no, I hear you. No, I agree. I do agree with that. Yeah. So I've said my piece on the length.
Yeah. All right. So final thoughts from each of us, not ratings, but anything else you want to talk about No Time to Die, and we'll once we hear final thoughts, we'll get into ratings. Paul, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
What else about this film is that you want to say for folks to know?
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that anybody with a haircut as bad as Cyclops is would actually ever be able to get the upper hand on James Bond. Like, that haircut was just distracting the entire time. It's like, you've got to be kidding me with this thing. Like, no, he is not going to be this badass. Like, he's like One Punch Charlie. He's down, not coming back. And then he just keep coming
his
back.
Character did give us the one sort of Roger Moore homage with the one-liner.
For sure. For sure. For sure.
I didn't find him threatening at all.
No, and it was the haircut. It's a horrible haircut. And he's wearing 1980s era sky jumpsuits, or what are they, the parachute jumpsuits things. It's like, oh, come on. Yeah, that character didn't work for me. But I do love an underground layer on a remote island, and I know it sounds funny, but I am not even kidding. Like, I just absolutely love an island layer, and this one was just absolutely impeccable. So bravo for them.
Yeah, excellent. Susan?
I mean, I can't without spoiling things. I had feelings about things that happened.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially near the, end of the film, kind of.
It did run us through the gamut of emotions that we can possibly experience. And that's what I loved about this film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was so excited for this. I was so excited for it. I was just hoping that it wouldn't let me down. Like, my reaction when the movie started was so
yeah. For myself, this is one of those rare moments where a film delivers after all the anticipation, and I found myself just so happy that it was finally here, and that it was just an experience. It puts to bed the era for Daniel Craig, and I have to say, I went from who to this is one of the best Bonds that we've ever had, and to piggyback on Paul's earlier two-tier deal, to be able to put him with Roger Moore and Sean Connery in that same class says a lot. And I'm just so pleased with the way in which not only he portrayed the role, but the way in which he'll be remembered for doing so. I think it's huge. I don't want to see him in Knives Out. I want to see him in the James Bond role. So, yeah. So, as you guys know from watching the show, we have a 5 taco rating system that we use here on Reel to Reel Talk. And you can give a movie as many as 5 tacos with extra guac if you want to give it some love. And so, guys, you guys are the deeper aficionados of the Bond series. If you don't mind, I'd like to start, and then I'll defer to those who know more than me. So for this film, I'm just going to be how I always am, and I'm going to be generous. This was a 5 taco splendid guac film for me. I'm going to watch it again and again and again. So 5 tacos plus guac for myself. Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
Okay.
Susan, you're the Bond absolute
Queen.
maniac, so let's close it off with you. I'm gonna go.
That.
I'm gonna go 4 tacos with amazing guac. It's perfect tacos, perfect guac. Just there were, if I put Skyfall as just the perfect Bond movie, which I do consider Skyfall to be the perfect Bond movie, this doesn't quite get to that. It's definitely like a top tier Bond movie for me, but it's not like wow, like top 2 or 3. So 4 tacos guac, which is that's good.
That is good. I am going to go with Sergio and say 5 tacos plus guac because high pitched squeal. I wasn't disappointed. I wasn't the made it worth the wait, and it was definitely like I think I was so amped up that like I don't think I went to sleep because we watched a later showing, and I don't think I went to sleep until like 3 a.m.
Oofa.
because I was just like
wired. Yeah. We actually I posted. We went to the film together. It started at 9:45, and it was long.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I
would
have definitely fallen asleep.
Did not. I was like.
There were some points where I was like,
I go to sleep at midnight.
Awesome.
Turn into a pumpkin.
Well, we definitely encourage you to go check out No Time to Die. It is a fantastic thrill ride of a film. If you are a Bond fan, you got to watch it.
If you're not a Bond fan, you got to watch it.
Let's do it
Maybe
anyway.
You might be one.
Yeah.
So that is our look at the James Bond film franchise. We thank you so much for joining us here. We are running a bit long, as you can tell, but that's okay because we got lots to say. Thank you for joining us. We like to hear from you, so please follow us on Facebook. Our page is Reel to Reel Talk, so join us there. Also on Instagram at Reel to Reel Talk. You can see show posters and find out what we've talked about in past episodes. Here on YouTube, for those of you watching on YouTube, we thank you. Please click that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you know when our episodes land week to week. In case you miss us live, keep in mind next week we will be on at a different date. Again, we usually broadcast on Tuesday nights. Obviously, today is Monday. Next week we will be on Thursday, 8 Eastern, 7 Central. So please keep an eye on our social media so you know when the episode lands, and we'll remind you. But for now, we're going to get into segment. We're going to have, because of the length, we're going to go ahead and throw it to Paul for what the hell did I just watch? Because did I hear you say real time?
Yes. So first ever for what the hell did I just watch? I'm going to do a movie that just came out this past weekend, so you can go and check it out yourself. And I highly recommend it this time, actually. The movie I watched is a little movie out of Iceland called Lamb. And it's just in time for Halloween. It's definitely got a horror tint to it, but it's not super horror-y that it's like slasher. It is not slasher. It is not super horror-y in that it's like satanic or anything. It's not like that. It just has a pall over it, not P-A-U-R, but P-A-L. It has a pall over it that just is as thick as an Icelandic fog, and Okay, so this movie is we're introduced to a family, a couple, Maria and Ingvar. Maria being played by Noomi Rapace, who you may recognize from Prometheus if you've seen that movie. And they run they have a big huge farm in Iceland, and they have a whole bunch of sheep, and they're helping some sheep give birth, and there's something wrong with one of them. We don't know exactly what it is. They give each other a look, and Maria walks off with lamb in her arms, and we see them basically have adopted this lamb as their child, and it's kind of weird. And then there's a big reveal, and like, okay, so here's the thing with this movie. This movie is all about tone. Like, there's probably a total of like 400 words in the whole movie. Like, it is not a Sergio Tacchi special. It's very muted in its dialogue, but the tone is just absolutely killer. And I mean, and there, there's a intro sequence before we actually meet the couple that sets the sort of the horror, and I'm going to use quotes, horror overtones that just it's literally like a fog, because you can get through it, and if your head's above it, you can see past it, but there's just this thing that hangs over the movie the whole time, and this weird family that has this weird lamb that they have adopted as their child, and it's really weird but fantastic. And it's a tough one to get all the way, like, not tough to get all the way through, because but like tough because it's just like it just keeps dragging you, and slow. This one is, you've heard of slow burn movies. This is a slow burn movie. And then it just, and my only complaint is, and then it ends. Like that, and not so much that like, oh, I was having so much fun, I wish it kept going, but like, it's like, if you like movies that have a resolution and a closing of the story and stuff, this is not that. It's just, something happens and you're like, what? And then it's over. It
goes to black.
No! So,
oh man, I was intrigued, and then you said that, I'm like, oh, that's one of the worst things that movies do.
This one does that. But
good to know.
It really is. I loved this movie. I really did. I took my son. It was his first ever foreign language film, and this was a good one because he didn't have to do a lot of reading. So
there you go.
Yeah, it is not a family film, however. Just because I took my son does not mean that you should take your children to see this movie.
Good PSA. I like that. All right. Well, week to week, you can find out what kind of weirdness Paul is watching, and make sure you keep up with him by joining us week to week. Also, returning next week will be Susan Finally Saw and a Real Time Rewind. And Paul, we thank you for carrying the load this week on the segments portion. We appreciate that. All right. Next week, it is time once again for Netflix Roulette. Our friends at realgood.com. We're going to talk about them again next week, and we will let you know through our social media what our topic's going to be. But please join us, because we're also going to take a look at a couple of films as we continue our marathon a few weeks of new movies that are coming out and such. So make sure you come back and join us. Paul, Susan, talking James Bond films is fun, but talking movies is even more funner. So
most virus.
More fun. So I look forward to being together with you guys again next Thursday. We'll remind folks when to join us. I do want to say a quick thank you to Blair Hollingsworth, friend of the show, who's commenting throughout along with Charles Abram. We appreciate you guys participating with us on YouTube, and we encourage folks to do so as we continue this journey together. So make sure you get out there, watch movies, enjoy them, tell us what you're watching, and then join us week to week to find out what we're going to talk about here on Real to Real Talk. More importantly, remember, you're awesome, you're amazing, and the world's a better place because you are in it. We'll see you next time on